And welcome to the NFL Today on YouTube. I'm James Brown along with Coach Bill Cowher, Nate Burleson, and Matt Ryan. And folks, the playoffs this coming year, a distinctly different feel to it in a radical way. Bill, take a look at this graphic and talk about that.
Yeah, you're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs since 2018. Patrick Mahomes has been to the playoffs, 7 straight AFC Championship appearances. He will not be in the playoffs again this year. It's 5-time Super Bowl, 3 wins right there. Listen, it's been a heck of a run. I mean, a hell of a run, really, for the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, the one thing I will say, like, when you are the team that every year, everyone is sitting there and designing their team, how do I beat the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yep.
We've seen the Baltimore Ravens try to they can't get over it. We saw the Buffalo Bills, they could not get over it.
Yep.
The only team that actually did through that period of time was the Cincinnati Bengals. But yet, continually, week in, year out, they retool, they rebuild. The standard has been so high, and it's very hard because you become the litmus test for every football team. And I think the bottom line is I saw what happened last year. All those games they were winning, they were very dynamic. All of a sudden, they became one-score games a year ago.
Yeah.
They were 12-0. In those one-score games this year, they were 1-7.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the line got decimated. You start losing some of the free agents because you become so good. Everyone's value goes up, and that's why the cap is great, and that's why the NFL is great, because it's meant to create parity and not to have some team that have that kind of run that the Kansas City Chiefs have had. So I admire them for what they've done. It's been impressive. They've done it with class. They've done it with style, and I don't think they're done. They'll retool. I know Andy Reid and I know Patrick Mahomes. They're going to sit on this thing in the offseason. They're going to seethe about it, but they'll come back because they still have a lot to work with nucleus-wise.
Listen, the haters, they want this dynasty to end.
Yes.
But that's not the case. They have what they need to retool. And they obviously have some areas that they need to address, but they have the core elements to retool, rebuild, and get back to where they once were. You know, I look at what they did early on in the season. They lost some key games. And then they were trying to get guys on the field for different reasons. Xavier Worthy banged up, Rashee Rice, he had the suspension. And those are just a couple of elements in the pass game. And it just seems like they were chasing that level of consistency on offense every single week. And there was something I noticed about this team. It wasn't as creative as previous seasons. And the reason I think it wasn't as creative because you have to be consistent on offense first before you start dialing up a lot of those trick plays. Years past, they were playing at such a high level that it was almost like they were throwing in the trick plays just to spice things up. So they got to get back to the very core of it, which is a flowing offense, a consistent offense, and then get back to playing that very entertaining brand of football that we are used to.
Yeah, and I'm with both of you guys. I think you have to pay respect to what has been done. That level of consistency for as long as it was there is so difficult to do. And that only happens when you've got good organizational structure and a great head coach, great quarterback, and those pieces around it. But this team, this year, I think was fundamentally flawed. I think we've all mentioned it. Injuries on the offensive line, instability on the offensive line, ineffective play on the offensive line. Defensive line, same. I think has gotten older, and they don't have enough dynamic playmakers on that side. But there are certain metrics you have to hit in order to win in this league. Number one, you've got to be positive in the turnover margin. They have not been. You've got to take the football away. They were actually pretty good about protecting the football, but they didn't take the ball away enough on the defensive side of the ball.
Right.
I think that comes in a couple of different factors. Not affecting the quarterback enough in terms of the pass rush, and we saw that throughout the season. Spags pressuring more and more because of the inability to get home with 4. I also think there's some issues in the secondary. More players, they need more players in the secondary that are ball hawks and tight coverage guys. The other thing is, offensively, I think, Nate, you said it, a lack of rhythm and consistency and timing in the passing game.
Yep.
All of the plays that they were making this season felt like they were off schedule. And let's just take a look at the plays we were making today. You know, here it is, Patrick Mahomes, but again, off schedule, having to take off and run with the football in order to score.
Yep.
And then here we go, a little bit later, Patrick Mahomes, again, off schedule.
Off schedule.
Having to move, having to try and create and extend, finding nothing there, not being able to do anything. Those are plays we've seen him make in the past. Here's another. Again, off schedule, slightly, but inconsistent with the throw right there. Climbing in the pocket, not being on the same page. And one more view at it right here. Again, off schedule, having to scramble to the right. It's tough to be consistent when you have this many off-schedule plays. So I just continue to look at it. There's just so many things that they haven't done kind of in rhythm in the pass game. And I think that's partly, too, the inability to run the football.
Well, and I think that's one of the things to me that I think to be consistent year in and year out is the ability to adapt and adjust every year to who you really are. We can say that we have this system in place, we'll keep dropping people to keep this system going, but sometimes our system gets flawed, and you have to adjust through the course of the season. You've talked about this offensive line. This was 3 of those 5 starters were gone.
Yeah.
You started this. You talk about last year, Joe Tooney had to go out to left tackle to finish that playoff run and get them into the Super Bowl. So they have made a lot of changes on that offensive line. And say what you want. I know when you do not have that stability, it goes back to the quarterback.
Yep.
All of a sudden, like you said, I've seen Patrick Mahomes starting to look down and looking for places to go, escape more often this year than I ever had in the past. It goes to the off-schedule part of that. Some of it is the improvise. He can improvise greater than anybody.
Absolutely.
But only at times. But that's when that becomes the very fiber of who you are.
When that becomes what you're hanging your hat on, it becomes increasingly. No, it's not sustainable because, like we've seen, yes, these guys do have a feel for making plays with them, but you just don't know when you can count on that. The one last thing I'll say about their offense is I think all season, too many times they got down in the red area and did not come away with touchdowns. And when you're talking about winning one-score games and being on the right side of those things and your margin for error is so small, touchdowns down there matter. You can't keep coming away with 3 points over and over and over. So do I think they'll be back? I absolutely do. I think when you have a head coach like Andy Reid, when you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, you've always got a chance, and they'll be in the mix. And a defensive coordinator like Spags. The thing I think Andy will do, in my opinion, is back to the basics.
Yeah.
I think he's been a great coach in this league for as long as he's been because the fundamentals are always sound, and they just didn't show up enough throughout this season.
Yeah, and you know, when it comes to Mahomes, we won't make any assumptions. Hopefully, he'll be just fine with that knee that we saw. But there's also other questions. Some notable free agents. Listen, you got Travis Kelce. That's a big one. Just because of what he means to the squad. Marquise Brown, of course, the fast wide receiver. And then Kareem Hunt at running back. And then Brian Cook. You know, think about Kelce and what he means to this team and what he means to this offense. Has he slowed down a bit? Sure. But he still is, you know, the heart and soul of this squad. You know, it's Mahomes and then it's Kelce. These guys have given us maybe the best quarterback tight end duo of all time. I know Brady and Gronk has something to say about that. But the question is, will he come back for another year? Yeah. This year was tough for a guy like Kelce. You're not putting out the same production. The offense doesn't have the same flow. And now you'll be sitting at home like the rest of us watching the playoffs from the outside in. So I just think that's a big-time question that we have to ask.
Yeah, and I think you look at this team, I think the transition that they need to be able to make is put another face on this body. And I think that's the thing that you have to be able to embrace. And I think, again, it's hard when you've been hunted for 10 years. Like they've been hunted, man. They've been the standard maker for everything they do. And they got to bring it every week because they become the Super Bowl and the litmus test for every team every week. Yeah. And that's hard to sustain over a period of time.
That's a fact.
You know, you can sit there and get up, and these guys are as good as anybody getting it up. I think they'll get it up. This will be something they can sit back. But I also think that's the rest of the National Football League catching up to where they are.
And that division. Specifically, what we're seeing with Denver, that's a young football team in Denver that's got pieces all over the place and seems like they're ascending. We don't think they're going to take a step back. I think the same for the Chargers. They've played most of this season in the AFC West without their 2 starting tackles, and they're in the mix. This division is going to be very competitive next season.
The only thing I would add to what you guys said, because you did such a great job in terms of the particulars, I think this is one of the classiest organizations in all of football. Absolutely. It always starts at the top. And the Hunts have been there. Yeah. Number 2, you talked about the coaching staff, but Patrick Mahomes, to me, has a championship caliber attitude. Never heard him point a finger, talking about the other players, complaining. He just went out there and led by example. And what an example. And you're right. I think he'll be back again for sure.
Heart of a champion.
Heart of a champion. Nicely done, Bill. All right, folks, be sure to watch us, the NFL Today, every Sunday at 12 noon Eastern, right here on CBS.
Welcome inside our CBS Sports studios. I'm Adam Schien. He's Kyle Long. Ding dong, the witch is dead. The Kansas City Chiefs eliminated from the playoffs after Week 15. And Kyle, there was a real shot this was going to happen based upon the scenarios and, frankly, based upon my picks going in. I'm not surprised we're talking about a retrospect on the Chiefs' 2025 campaign after Week 15 and the 1 o'clock Eastern time games on Sunday because I picked Buffalo to win. I picked the Chargers to go into Arrowhead and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You saw Jacksonville win. You saw Houston win. And if those four things happen, then the Chiefs were going to be done. And look, there's a lot to get into, including, to me, the end of the dynasty. Here's what I think happened. I want to go back to the Super Bowl. I think the Philadelphia Eagles knocked the air of invincibility out of the Kansas City Chiefs. I think the Chiefs forever had this awesome Patriot, old school Yankee, old school warrior-like mentality where we expect to win. If the opposition makes a mistake, bam, they pounce. And when they got destroyed against Philly in that Super Bowl, they didn't just lose the Super Bowl. It changed everything. We saw Week 1, the Chargers beat them. Week 2, you saw Philly in the Super Bowl rematch, march into Arrowhead. You don't even have to play your best to beat the Kansas City Chiefs anymore. They were losing one-score games, getting crunched to the Texans, losing Jacksonville. Denver beats them. Calls that normally go their way don't go their way. Andy Reid, who I think is a Mount Rushmore coach, you know, what he did with that going for it against Houston, you know, that's something he doesn't do historically. I'm just not surprised, ebb and flow of the season, that we're here talking about it being over for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those teams, one of those situations, one of those dynasties where we really have to see it through. And it felt like every week for the last 5 weeks, we were saying, well, this is brink of elimination. They got to have this one, backs against the wall. But if you go back and take a look at what the Kansas City Chiefs lost this offseason, they lost an All-Pro by the name of Joe Thuney. And I talk often about the interior part of the pocket being the paramount priority for offenses, particularly guys like Patrick Mahomes, who like stepping up in the pocket, like seeing the play develop down the field. A little bit of, scramble drill can happen, but it all starts when you step up in the pocket, and then you can navigate either quarterback right or quarterback left. Joe Thuney, going to the Chicago Bears, was a huge loss for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Great point.
Josh Simmons was a great draft pick, but he wasn't around all year.
Yeah.
They had injuries. We saw Suamataia, Wanye Morris, a number of guys rotate in there on the offensive line, Caliendo, and some of those guys did a good job. None of them were Joe Thuney. None of the guys that were in there when Trey Smith was out of the lineup and has been out of the lineup can fill in the same way. And it's funny you mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles, but it's kind of like the air of invincibility is out of Philadelphia as well, because of their offensive line too. And I think it always circles back to the offensive line. Now, I know the running back position is a giant cavity in this offense, and it's one that's been a featured position in this offense for a long time. And they don't have it. Pacheco doesn't have the juice. Kareem Hunt, it ain't 2018 anymore.
No.
They're going to have to revamp this offense. But I think that if you're in that locker room, and obviously there's a lot of conversations being had right now. What is the situation with Patrick Mahomes? His knee, is it bone? Is it ligament? What does the surgery look like? What's the timeline look like? But all the while, you have to understand that him and Bob Stroop, his trainer, are going to get him right. And I promise you, when we look back 10 years from now, it's going to be before the injury and after the injury. And I'm not talking about in a bad way, because I know how Patrick is, and I know the type of rehabilitation he'll go through and the hell he's going to put his body through to be able to be dominant again and be him again. But all the while, the Kansas City Chiefs have a lot of very important decisions they have to make. The defense didn't have the teeth as they have in years past. Third down was a real issue for these guys, getting off the field, where history will tell you Spag's third down defenses are some of the best. Some of his players are awesome, but yes, it starts with just having a scheme and having guys to be able to go out there and execute it. Their sack numbers were down. This Chiefs team was not the Chiefs team that we have seen dominate the National Football League over the course of the last half decade, Adam. So a lot of people will eulogize the Chiefs this week. I won't. You're going to see a new version of the Kansas City Chiefs next year, and that is because they have to have a new version of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, I think you're right, new version. You're right that they have to. I love that you accurately started with the line, because that Thuney defection, we knew it at the time. That's a big deal, and it felt like, a rare mistake by the Kansas City Chiefs to let him go and, greener pastures in Chicago. You're right about what happened with the first-round draft pick at the tackle position. That was huge.
Which was a home run, by the way.
No doubt.
If he's in pads.
No question, but he has to play. Travis Kelce?
Yep.
Is he going to retire?
Dude, Travis Kelce, I think he's 5th in the National Football League in receiving yards as a tight end.
Would you be surprised, though, if he called it a career?
I understand that people want to talk about X, Y, and Z with this guy and show me a million Instagram pictures and talk about weddings.
Right.
But at the end of the day, number 87 shows up and he kicks ass and he catches the football. He provides the Chiefs with a safety blanket offensively. I think he's earned the right to be able to make that decision on his own. I ain't Travis Kelce, but if I was, I'd be like, let's run it back until I get out of the top 5, at the very least, Adam. Until you get out of the top 5, stay in there.
Even in the division, Denver's not going anywhere. The Chargers aren't going anywhere. Raiders could get the top pick in the draft, just throwing that into the
Let's see
conversation.
what they do with that.
It just feels like it's over in terms of the dynasty in Kansas City.